We're going to bring the Public Safety Committee meeting to order. Mr. Clerk, can you please read the roll?
Alderman Bosley?
Present.
Alderman Vaquero? Present. Alderman Cone? Alderman Carter? Present. Alderman Coter? Alderwoman Spencer? Present. Alderwoman Green? Chairman Kennedy? Vice Chairman French?
Present.
We have 5 present.
Thank you. We're going to start off with a presentation today. We have a representative from Taser.
Correct.
And the other company, Axon?
So Axon is actually a division of Taser.
Okay.
So it's all one and the same.
All right. And they're going to give us a presentation today on their body camera technology. And I think you have a PowerPoint presentation and some demos, is that right?
I do. Thank you. And I appreciate your time, all of you, for allowing me to come in, spend a few minutes talking with you. My name is David Fowers. I'm a regional sales director for Taser International. You're probably familiar with us. We've been in the law enforcement industry for about 20 years. You're probably familiar with us with our less lethal weapons that St. Louis Metro PD uses currently, and a lot of other agencies in and around the area. In the last several years, we've come to the forefront with body camera technology, and what I wanted to do is spend a few minutes with you guys today talking a little bit about what we have as a solution, and then answer any questions you might have. Feel free to ask questions along the way. If I have a slide up and there's something that you need to ask about, don't hesitate to stop me and we can discuss it right then and there, if that's okay with you. Any questions before we begin? I take that as a no. So real quickly, as you mentioned, Axon is a division of Taser. This is our technology division that houses our body cameras, our evidence technology, and evidence management. We just wanted to make some distinguishing differences between the weapons themselves and the camera technology as well. As everyone knows, body camera technology is at the forefront of a lot of people's minds now, especially with Michael Brown's situation that happened a couple of years here, right here in St. Louis. A lot of agencies are adopting body camera technology. What we're finding, though, is that there's the two sides of the story situation. When you have a situation like, for example, this is on a street scene in New York City here, the first thing that happens when you have an incident, what do you see here? You see everyone's cell phones coming out, recording everything, what's going on, everything from the vantage point of the bystander. But the question is, what is the recording of what's going on with the officer? What is the officer seeing? What is he or she doing in this situation? Obviously, they're responding because they're a first responder, but oftentimes, minutes after this happens, this is all posted on YouTube, and you're getting basically bystander video. So we have that situation, and what we're trying to do is help law enforcement have their side of the story to be told. So in the case of a situation that happened down in Texas, just outside Dallas last year, this made national news. This was a gentleman that was being apprehended at an Applebee's there in the Dallas area. The police went into the Applebee's restaurant because they were apprehending him to arrest him. He went to the restroom. They brought him out, and this is what basically ensued. Oh, sorry. No, that was a little bit graphic. But in a situation like this, had there not been any sort of police video work or police video footage, what would likely have been the sentiment that night on the national news of seeing an officer shooting a supposed innocent victim? He pulled out a toy gun. It was not a real gun. And what would have been the narrative of the story for the news that night? Likely would have been excessive use of force. Man was just simply playing around with a toy gun. Officer shot and killed the man, and now we have questions as to why. But with the video, we now have a good part of the story that's being told. We don't have the whole story, but we have a good idea of what the narrative is.
Those were two different shots. Were those two body cameras?
That is correct. So in that particular incident, good question. Both officers were wearing body cameras, and that's a good point. So more officers wearing body cameras, you're getting more of an angle of what took place. So if 2 or 3 or more officers roll up on a scene, all officers have the ability to record that incident and be able to share what that information shows or what the situation shows. What I have on screen here is a couple of independent internal results of studies done by two of our customers. One is San Diego PD, the other is Mesa PD in Arizona, which is a very large suburb of Phoenix. What we've seen in both of these independent studies that were done within the last year, year and a half, and these are full deployment departments. San Diego has roughly 1,000 officers, similar to the size of St. Louis, and Mesa has about 600 or 700 officers. We've seen roughly about 40% of complaints down in both departments and in both cities and both municipalities, as well as use of force being down both in San Diego and Mesa as well, significantly. So what we're seeing, based on these independent results of these departments, is that these kinds of things, as far as use of force and complaints, are going down with the ability for officers to have cameras on them.
Can you go back to the other slide?
Please, this one?
These are just Axon or Taser cities with
With Taser, yes.
how many cities do you,
Good question. So the next slide actually brings that up. So there's an organization,
the question I had was,
Okay.
if we took, do you have those statistics on the average for all the cities that use this product? Or, I mean, are those just sort of the best cities, as far as decreasing in those stats, or?
Yep, these are two cities that chose to do independent studies. We have other cities that also that are in the process of doing
Okay.
studies, and as they become available, we would be more than happy to
So
share
those are the only two cities that have that data
that we
independently
know
done?
of,
Okay.
that have been shared with us publicly. Yep. There might be studies that have been done internally but have not been shared to the public, or at least to us. And so, sort of a segue to your point, what other cities are out there that are using body cameras? Well, of all major city chiefs, as far as the association out there of the largest cities out there in the country, the Chiefs organization, of that organization, 95% of all those cities have chosen to go to Axon or with Taser. And there's reasons for that, and I'll get into that. And you can see sort of in the watermark some of the different cities that are behind there, like Los Angeles, like Fort Worth, like Cleveland, like San Diego, like Pittsburgh, Charlotte, Mecklenburg, Tampa, all these different cities. What Axon is, or what we provide with Taser, is an end-to-end solution. From the ability to capture video out in the field by the officer, ingest that into evidence.com, which is our back-end data storage system, and then be able to share that internally within the department, secure it, mark for retention, mark for deletion, all the different things that you can do with the actual video itself, do redaction, all these different tools internally, all done under the umbrella of a secure system that's locked down by its users. And then if you'd like, you can actually push that video or that evidence out to your court system. So either to your DA's office, your prosecutors, or whoever, you can actually send that video over, a version of that video, to the courts for them to actually see the video themselves and do their casework. Any questions on that?
So is that on some kind of a secure network?
It is. So, and I'll talk about that in a second. It is a cloud-based network, and a server, or service, I should say, and I'll get to that in just a minute. But yes, that is correct. So let me talk real quickly about the actual hardware itself with the cameras. Right here, as you can see, this is our Axon Flex camera. The reason why we call it Flex is that it has the ability to be worn in multiple positions on the body. This happens to be one that we use with Oakley sunglasses. It has a special clip that's magnetized, and the ability for the officer to actually transition and put the camera right here on his epaulette or his collar if he's not wearing glasses. So there's lots of different ways that the officer can wear this. What's important about this is actually a head mount view of what's going on as far as a point of view. So what's nice about this is that the officer, if he's blading, if he's looking in different directions, it's going to capture everything that that officer sees or does. We also have a body mount, which I do not have with me today, but it's actually a chest mount that sits center mast, and it has the same basic functionality. What's nice about our cameras is they have a 12-plus hour battery life. The field of view on this is 75 degrees. Our body center mast camera is 140 degrees, so you're getting a good wide angle of what's going on depending on which camera the officer is actually using. This can record a full entire shift. It also has the ability to do a buffer, meaning that you can actually click the button, go back in time 30 seconds, sorry I keep on hitting that, go back in time 30 seconds if an officer missed something, and it'll actually capture that video of what the officer may have missed. Does that make sense?
Sure. So you said the battery has a 12-hour...
12 plus hours. 12 plus hours of battery life.
Now, is that of standby or recording? It can record for 12 straight hours?
It can record solid with this capacity of this camera and with the data storage space, you can record about 9.5 hours. So depending on the shift, if an officer is working a 9 or 8 or 10-hour shift, he'll be able to roughly record his entire shift if he chooses to do so. And of course, that's all dictated and predicated on body camera policy by the department and by the city. But in theory, this camera will go 12 plus hours. Well, not in theory, we've seen it time and time again, but the theory is that the officer can record his entire shift if he wants to.
And how do you see these typically being used? Are officers being trained to record them at the beginning of an incident, or do they record their whole shifts?
That is all dependent on the department. I've seen departments, or I've heard of departments where they have required them to record a full shift. More often than not, it's usually just based on the incident and what that officer judges or deems worthy of being recorded. As far as an interaction, it really is case by case or city by city dependent on the agency.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, go ahead.
So you asked about where this video goes. At the end of the shift, the officer will then take his camera. He will then actually dock it into one of our special docks. This dock is networked to the cloud, and you've probably heard that term before. We use a cloud-based system. We partner with Microsoft Azure for storing all of the video in a secure location. I'll get into the security aspects in just a second. But what happens is the officer transfers the video through this special dock. He docks it, it uploads the video from there, and it charges the camera simultaneously. So when he comes back on shift the next day or the next time he comes back to work and reports, the camera is wiped clean of all the data because it's been sucked up into evidence.com, which is our back-end data storage system and management system, and the camera itself is charged. Any questions on that process? We call that a dock and walk process. So it allows the officer not to spend a whole lot of time babysitting or managing the hardware itself. You have a question?
You have a question?
Well, I do. I'm just curious. The cost of storing and keeping it is about how much?
We have different plans, and I can get more into specifics on the cost of the camera and the storing of the data. We have a la carte plans all the way up to unlimited data plans, all the way up even to HD plans as well, when and if that time comes where the department would be actually recording HD video as well. So we do have some plans that I can provide you. I can do that offline and provide you some specific numbers and quotes and costs.
Okay, it's more curious.
Are you looking for actual specific dollar amounts and numbers?
Just on an average. I mean, one of the things, the cost of the cameras, I think, from what I understand, we keep saying it's pretty insignificant compared to the cost of the storage.
Correct. So, yeah, that's one thing that...
Go ahead.
That's one thing to keep in mind with the purchase of a body camera solution. It's not just the hardware that you're talking about. It's the back-end storage and the management of that data. That's really the key component. The camera itself, which Taser has done a great job in building the best camera out there on the market with all the different functions and features that this camera can do and you can work with. The cameras themselves run anywhere from about $400 to $600 for the cameras themselves, the hardware. The docks are $1,500, and they are a 6-bay dock. So this allows 6 different officers to load and dock their cameras, and then you just have to do the simple math of how many different docks you need and how many different cameras you need. On the back end with the storage, we have different data storage plans for unlimited data storage for the officers to be able to record as much video as they want. Based on your retention policies, you don't really necessarily have to babysit that retention in terms of keeping and managing the storage of the videos. The system itself and the back-end costs will take care of all the costs that you would have to incur with the storage itself. But typically, on average, you're looking at anywhere from about $25 up to about $80 a month for a Taser license of the camera. That includes the storage of the video and the management of the video on the back end as well, with everything that you get on the back end with evidence.com. Does that answer your question?
I think so. Sounds like on the average per camera, it's about $85 per month per camera for the storage. So
for the storage aspect, not including the hardware costs, correct.
right. So, and we have
roughly 1,000 officers, 1,100 officers.
But not always on duty at the same time, so.
Right. And that's where we would need to get into how many cameras the department would actually need, and then do some simple math as far as this is how much it's going to cost you. What's nice about Taser's programs, it gives you cost certainty. So when the police department comes to the alderman and says this is what it's going to cost, Taser's solution and program, we can provide you a down to the dollar cost over, say, a 3, 4, 5-year period of what your costs will look like for the hardware, for the storage, the management, everything. So you're not doing any sort of guesswork in terms of what the overall costs will be. One thing to keep in mind too, and I get this question asked a lot by different city councils, et cetera, is who owns the data? In your particular case, the city of St. Louis or the St. Louis PD or whoever is storing these video owns this video. It's not Taser's, it's not Microsoft's that is where we use, is the backbone of our system. It's the city of St. Louis. You guys own this video, always, and that will always be the case.
So if somebody would request the video, would they sunshine the city police department then, and then you would provide it? And then my last question is, how long do you keep this stuff? I mean, indefinitely?
So it's not a question about how long we keep it. The video and the ownership of the video and the data is yours. So depending on how long you have a contract with Taser, that video will always be available to you, to the city, to access. At the end of the contract, you can either choose to re-up with Taser or go in a different direction with another vendor, or if you decide to build your own system, you know, down the road or whatever the case may be. The bottom line is that the video will always be your video. You will always own it. Does that make sense? Or, so maybe I'm not answering the question directly.
No, just, and this will be the last question, because that made me think of another question. So say that we have the contract and it's a 5 or 10 year, whatever it is.
Right.
At the end of that time, the city says, well, we can store our own video, and we end the contract. Will we get all that video from you?
That's correct.
Or it doesn't just,
Yep.
in other words, so we're not, it wouldn't be where you say, no. if
No,
you're
sorry,
not
we
happy
won't
with-
give it to you. It's our video,
Oh,
correct.
yeah, okay.
Outlined in our master services agreement, which is our legal document with the contract, it specifically states that the video will always remain yours. At the end of the contract, if you choose or we choose to part ways, that video will stay with you. You help us understand where you want that video to be stored to, and we'll assist you in transporting it to another location, whether it be servers or hard drives or whatever it is that you guys store. But all that video will be yours. You won't have the luxury of having all the bells and whistles of what evidence.com, which is the management system that keeps tracks and maintains and does the redaction and all the different tracking of audit trails of the videos themselves. That will sort of go away, but the videos themselves, the raw video, the footage, is all yours. And you get to keep that forever.
No, thank you. That sounds really good, actually.
Okay. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it did.
Okay.
Any other questions?
No, that was it.
Other questions?
Yeah, please.
Just in terms of how much are you seeing other cities and police departments investing in this? Are they going all out at once, or are they phasing in cameras at a time? What
Yeah.
what do you think is?
Yeah, good question. So I've been with Taser for about 3 years. I've worked with a lot of different agencies. I'll give you a couple of examples. Minneapolis PD, who has 650 or so sworn, they went all in all at once, and they purchased all their equipment over a 5-year period. I've seen the same thing, or then by the same token, Salt Lake City PD has done a phased-in process. They have roughly 500 officers, and they do roughly about 100 cameras at a time as far as on an annual basis. It really all depends. It depends on what the budgetary restrictions you might have for the body camera project and really what the mentality of the police department is, as well as with the city, in determining, are we ready to outfit all of our officers at once? What we are seeing, though, is if they do outfit all their officers at once, they are still doing it in a phased rollout. So you can purchase everything all at once, but then you may go precinct by precinct, 100 at a time or 50 or 75 or whatever works best for you and from a manageability standpoint. What's great about our system, and I'll get more into it here, is, and I'll kind of skip ahead, is the ability for the system itself. You can connect every stakeholder within the city and the PD to access evidence.com, and the system can be up and running day one. Because there's no hardware to buy other than the cameras themselves, which is a little bit of a different situation. We're talking about the back-end servers and all the hardware necessary, the networking and everything. everything that you need to run the system, as long as you're networked, which I assume you are, you can actually start running evidence.com from day one. For example, when we did the trial with St. Louis Metro PD a few months ago, we did roughly 20, 30 cameras. We had everything up and running literally within a day. There was no servers to ship out or special gear or anything like that from a networking standpoint. Everything was ready to go with the cameras, with the docks being plugged in and ready to go from day one. They even went through a phased process because all of their sergeants and supervisors were using the cameras, not line officers. And so we had to do sort of a retraining every month over a three-month period. And that transition was very quick and simple and easy. So to your point, it's a very quick, ready to deploy that same day as far as getting everything up and running.
Ask a question here. So first, I just want to say to the folks in the audience, just so you know, this process is the alderman will not be deciding what company eventually that the city does select. This will be through a whole bidding process, probably through the Board of Public Service or through an internal police process. But I think it is important that we, as the Public Safety Committee, are educated about the technology itself, the limitations of the technology, the capabilities of the technology. And we don't want this to be just an hour-long infomercial for one particular company.
Understood.
But you all have made yourself available, and you are one of the largest, if not the largest, provider of this technology. So I think a lot of questions will be technical. As far as the cost, I'll just say now, if you can maybe give us, provide us as the committee, a cost breakdown, just so we can kind of have a picture of how much this would cost.
Okay.
Again, using the ballpark of around 1,100 officers, which is
Right.
roughly where we're at.
Okay.
I did have one technical question.
Want that today, or did you want as a follow-up?
As a follow-up.
On the cost? Okay,
Yeah,
great. And
as
I'd
a
be more than happy to do that for you.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Technical questions here. So I think you mentioned the video that you record with that device is not HD. Is that correct?
This particular model is not HD. This is our Axon Flex model. This came out about 2.5 years ago. This will now be replaced by what's called our Flex 2 in about 6 to 8 months, and it will be HD. I do not have the Axon Body 2, which is the center mount camera with me today. I lent it to another department last week, and they haven't given it back to me yet, so I apologize for being empty-handed on that. You saw the picture of it in the previous slide, right here. It's up here somewhere. There we go. This is our Axon Flex on the left,
And that
or
does
on the
record
right,
HD?
and the Axon Body 2 on the right is HD.
Okay.
1080p.
And is that an increased cost?
Nope,
Same price?
same price.
New technology? Okay.
Yep.
So if the city purchased it, we would buy the HD ones?
Correct, and we have what are called unlimited plans. So each officer can record to their heart's content, and the price will still remain the same on the license cost.
Okay, and in this solution, it's all cloud-based, meaning that you all maintain the data. There isn't a version of this in which the city has rows and rows of hard drives recording all this stuff.
That's correct.
Under your solution, you and Microsoft maintain the video.
Yes, it's a 100% cloud-based solution, meaning you're not going to have any sort of premise-based servers managing the data or keeping the data, storing the data, or doing anything of the like. It's all going to be done in the cloud.
And I think Alderman Vaccaro had mentioned, I don't know if I heard an answer though, in the event of a sunshine request,
Yes.
how is that handled?
Good question. So with the ability within the system, and again, this can get into more of that technical deep dive if you want us to come back and do a real deep dive into evidence.com, we'd be happy to do that. But within the system, you're allowed or able to produce a video from a FOIA request or a Sunshine Law request, where you can actually provide a video to a citizen who has requested a copy of the video. You can provide them a redacted version. We do provide internal redacting tools with the system that comes with it. It's included in the price. And then they can actually receive a copy of that video. You can.
And when you say redacted, just so folks know, that means that you can go back in and digitally blur people's faces
Right.
and blur things.
That is correct. And those tools are all a part of the suite of products or solutions that are in the actual system itself that you get with the actual cost. So the
Okay.
cost that I'm providing you includes all of that.
So the sunshine request would still go to either the city or the police department, and then the police would then prepare that video, redact it, and get it to a reporter, whoever requested it.
That is correct. And go ahead.
The police department would continue to be the custodian of records. Everything, Taser wouldn't do any of that. You would do all your sunshine requests through, as we do currently, then they would contact or have access to the cloud to do that.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and I'm glad that Dave mentioned that. That's a really important distinguishing
Good
factor
to have a
here.
lawyer around sometimes.
It is.
Rarely.
Thank you. No, he brings up a very good point, is at no time is Taser ever going into your data files and manipulating or sharing or looking or peeking at or taking a look at anything within the system. We sell you the system, the shell of the system, and all the features and functions and benefits of the system, the solution. It's your system to manage. So from a FOIA request standpoint, it would be in the custody of the PD. They could go in, and if they wanted to redact a copy, if they wanted to give them a complete virgin copy of the video, they could do that as well and then share that out. It's entirely up to them how they want to do it. Also within the system are full auditing trails, so anytime somebody goes in, if they have user rights and privileges and access to go in and look at a video or any of the data, everything is kept in an audit trail log, so you can see exactly who took a look at a video, not somebody's changed something, but if they made edits or anything or added notes or just simply viewed the video, it will provide a digital fingerprint to show who actually went in and took a look at that and what functions were performed.
Can a video be deleted or destroyed?
It can, but only based on permission rights within the system.
And there would be a record of who did that?
Absolutely, absolutely. So, yeah, from a retention standpoint, when we initially started providing this solution, we were providing more of an a la carte type of product. Over the last couple of years, we've found that having an unlimited type of data plan, retention doesn't become as much of an issue anymore. You can save as much video as you'd like because you have an unlimited data storage plan. So retention isn't as big of a thing as far as deleting video, but if you do have like a routine traffic stop, and then say after 60 or 90 or 6 months or whatever, that video just gets deleted in the system, you can basically mark it for deletion, but then there are also safeguards to prevent things from being haphazardly deleted.
Why don't you continue with your...
Just one last point, and then I'll wrap up. I wanted to make sure that it was real clear that we are CJIS compliant. If you're familiar with CJIS, that's the FBI's Central Justice Information System, where everything is kept. So they have compliances that have to be kept with these types of systems, and we are compliant and beyond with the system itself. So we provide all that. I mentioned something about audit trails. You can provide customizable permissions for all of your different users within the system. We have strict authentication protocols, Active Directory. So, for example, if you have single sign-on or other different types of things, it can work in conjunction with all that. So we've done all these different necessary steps to make sure that that data is secure. So whoever is actually going into the system, into evidence.com, there is a tracker, there's fingerprints, there's footsteps showing who went where and what and did whatever they did with the video itself. So anyway. That's pretty much all I've got. Are there any other questions?
Well, let's open up to questions from the committee. Can I have the roll there? And we'll do it in order of seniority. Alderman Bosley, you have any questions?
Yeah, almost 1/3 of every dollar that we spend goes to the police department. Where's this extra money gonna come from? Because the police have always complained that they're broke. They always want more money. Where's this money gonna come from?
So that's a question that I really can't answer because I don't work for the police department. All I'm simply doing is offering a solution that they can purchase. That's a decision and a determination that will have to be made by the city of St. Louis.
Well, how much money is this gonna cost?
Well, we went through that question a little earlier, but as I mentioned before, the cameras themselves run roughly about $500 for the cameras themselves. And then you have data storage system, monthly data costs for each license that everyone has, anywhere ranging from $25 a month all the way up to about $80 a month.
Now, each police officer will have one of those cameras.
Well, that would be the intent, but again, that's really dependent on the department itself.
And we got 3,000 police officers, right?
No, you're far from that.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know as far, that may be all employees of the police department, but as far as actual sworn officers that carry a badge and are out on the street, I believe the number is
About
closer to
1,100.
about 1,100.
I
So,
mean, why would, or why would not any police officer have that camera? Because if they're out there and they see something that's going on that's against the law, they have the responsibility to do something about it. And if he doesn't have that camera, you follow me?
I am.
Then what good are the cameras? Because those cameras, the best part of them is to protect the integrity of that police officer.
All right, and I think a lot of those questions are for the chief, and when we have the chief in, we can ask him about what the policy will be. And also this week on the Ways and Means Committee, we'll be examining the police department's budget and actually seeing if there is a line item right now for body cameras in this next fiscal year, and if not, how much we might need to move around to get this program started. As you mentioned, there is a big public support right now, and people are talking about body cameras, and we want to really see how we can implement this in the city of St. Louis as soon as possible. Any other questions?
Can I add one thing? As far
Sure.
as you mentioned
Go ahead.
policy, yeah, I want to make sure it's clear that Taser does not influence the policy of the department. That is done by the agency. Now, what we can do is we can provide sample policies that other departments that I've listed here that have adopted, and those are living documents, so oftentimes you implement one policy and over time things may change, but you're absolutely right. The policy will dictate when that officer will need or be required to turn the camera on or leave it off, stop recording, start recording, all the different things that go into it. And like I said, that's something that's done by the police department, not by Taser. We do not influence the policy itself.
Okay,
I just want to make sure that was clear.
thank you. Alderman Carr, any further questions
Just quickly.
or comments?
So I agree on a routine traffic stop.
Right.
After 6 months, they may want to delete some
Whatever your
things.
policy is, right?
Now, do you have the capability of making it a 2 or 3 person, in other words, where one person can't go in and delete something, where it would actually take maybe the officer that did the original stop and the chief?
Yeah, so in those situations, normally officers cannot delete their videos. And we've seen that, and I don't want to say that that's, you can set the system up however you like. I have, however, yet to see a system where officers themselves, line officers, can go in and delete a video. If they delete it, it's still going to stay out there. There's a fail-safe for having it deleted. And they, more often than not, don't have that ability. It has to be done at a supervisor, lieutenant, captain, deputy chief, or otherwise, or somebody else in that administrative capacity to actually go in and delete a video. The system itself can auto-delete files if they're, for example, if it's been tagged as a routine traffic stop and there's nothing else on there like a serious misdemeanor or felony, and after 60 days or 90 days or what have you, the video really has no value, then the video can just be deleted off, and you will get a warning letting you know that the video has been deleted. So the system can delete it. But back to your original question, officers typically, I have yet to see in working with Taser for 3 years, any department that allows their officers to go in and actually go in and delete their videos. Does that answer your question?
Sort of. I mean, can it be a deal where it takes 2 people to delete it, whether it's a lieutenant or a captain and the chief?
Right. So within the system, you can actually set up permissions and access rights and privileges, and that leads into that as far as what they are able to do and not do within the system. A chief would be able to basically delete a video, but there will be a digital fingerprint on there showing that, hey, Chief so-and-so actually deleted the video. More often than not, it doesn't work that way because the system is fully audit trailed, and so you can see everything that's going on within the system. So anything that's any sort of quote-unquote funny business would be able to be pulled up in an audit trail report, and that cannot be manipulated.
Well, okay, so, and this be last question. So you said that there's a fail-safe, so even though it's deleted, it stays out there anyway?
It does. There's still a period of time, so if you want to pull it back, you can actually go back in and undelete it if you want to, before it actually gets deleted.
But it still stays safe even though it's...
That's correct.
Okay.
But again, not everyone in the department would have, or the city or whoever would have those user rights or privileges. And anything that happens to it, again, there's an audit trail showing what took place in that process to delete it.
No, it sounds
So
like...
if you went in and deleted it, he would be able to go in and say, oh, he saw that you actually deleted it. On such and such day, at such and such computer with this IP address, everything is showing on that actual report.
Well, it sounds like a great company. That was just curious.
No, those are very good questions.
Alderman Carter, and I also see a couple of the aldermen who are not on the committee in the room. If they want to come up and ask questions, you're invited to as well.
Just one question, just in terms of policies and recommendation. What do you see, or which policy is more productive, just in terms of when to start the video, when officers have to turn them on themselves, or when they automatically come on, when the lights go on? Or which one do you see working more?
Yeah, so apologies for saying it this way. I'm just a sales guy.
Oh, okay.
So what I mean by that is I'm not in a position to influence,
Right.
recommend how a department, but as I mentioned earlier, we have lots of large agencies, i.e. San Diego, Fort Worth, agencies of similar size to St. Louis with similar sworn officer counts. They have active policies that you can borrow.
Right.
You can take the best of what they've offered and build upon that, and then take that information and then deploy that as part of your overall policy. As I said earlier, Taser's not interested in influencing your policy. We can sort of be a conduit to provide you with policies that other departments that have enacted their own policies, and you can borrow from that, but we're not going to step in, and I'm not at liberty to answer that question, or I don't feel comfortable answering that question.
Thank you.
Not qualified, really, I should say.
Alderwoman Green, you have any comments, questions?
Not at this time.
Alderwoman Flowers?
No questions.
Alderman Ogilvy back there? No comments, questions? All right. All right, well, I want to thank you for your time. If you can provide us some information on cost, that'd
Pricing,
be
yep.
appreciated.
Be more than happy to.
I did have one question. Does any other department in the region use this product right now? Is
Yep.
your product?
Yep, the closest agency that I know of, well, there's a few actually. So St. Charles PD is using Axon cameras, and obviously they're a smaller agency, but still of significant size as far as a suburb of St. Louis. Probably the largest in the immediate area would be Columbia, and also the University of Missouri, but Columbia itself actually has it, and they are fully deployed. I believe they have 125 cameras with all of their different officers.
Okay. And it's public information, and I'm sure we could look
Yes.
it up ourselves, but if you could give us how much their systems cost,
Yep.
that would help.
Be more
How
than
many
happy
cameras
to.
they have, how much it costs.
Yep, those are open records, absolutely, but we can provide that information to you,
Appreciate it.
absolutely.
All right, thank you for your time.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
We're going to shift now just to have a general discussion. As we all know right now, crime is a big problem in the city of St. Louis. We look at the violent crime rates, the number of homicides in the city, and also the number of shootings that may not result in death, but nonetheless are shootings, and the gun violence is plaguing our city. Many of us have become very frustrated. At our neighborhood meetings as aldermen, this is probably the number one concern we hear about, is the frustration with crime and violence in the city. Over the weekend, it was noted that the police chief assigned some 20 officers to patrol Washington Avenue downtown. And while we all appreciate how important downtown safety is and downtown tourism, many of us represent neighborhoods that have been experiencing crime problems for many years, and we're not seeing that level of deployment or commitment of resources, and it's become very frustrating. I personally have called on the mayor to ask for the chief's resignation. He says that he has full faith in the chief. He is the only one. I have not seen anyone else who has that level of faith. And so I know this is a problem for everybody, and I just wanted to open it up to discussion right now for you to be able to talk a little bit about what you're experiencing in your wards regarding crime and what you would like to see happen. Anyone have any comments, questions? Alderman Carter?
Well, I feel the same way you do. I think that the chief should be here wanting to explain his plan, just in terms of us moving forward from this point. And I think that it is huge. It's a huge slap in my residents' face when we have multiple murders, large numbers of crime. I mean, we actually live in the worst district just in terms of crime, the 6, and we are lacking a huge amount of resources that we need, you know. No disrespect to anything that's happening in any other part of the city, but I mean, it's common sense, and I'm not a criminologist, but it's common sense. If you have a majority of your crime happening in one part of the city, you put the extra resources there. You put the things there to help deter the crime or to help end it. And right now, it seems as when things happen in different parts of the city, when things happen on the north side or different parts of the south even, where a majority of African Americans are, we don't get that same fight that other parts of the city gets, just in terms of, you know, helping us with our situation. Our tax dollars should spend the same way as folks as downtown or in the Central West End, and right now my residents don't feel like they do. And it's just in terms of what we see. And like I said, I think that it is a large slap in my face and my residents when we have 20 plus officers walking on one street, along with the chief. And I could barely see two as I sit on my front for hours, or as I ride through my neighborhood. And so I think that this is bigger than the chief. The chief, I don't think that he could fix this. I think that we need an overall overhaul in our police department. Right now we have huge disparities just in terms of the way that blacks and whites are treated, the way that they are promoted, the way that they are disciplined. And that's something that this chief can't fix. It's something that he didn't start, but he is definitely guilty of the continuation of that. So I would like to see something larger, the DOJ, something. Because, I mean, we have major problems that this chief can't fix.
Anyone else? Alderman Vaccaro?
Just more of a comment. Meeting with all the police that were downtown yesterday and all through the weekend. You know, somebody got shot last night, right down from the stadium by the West End. And I agree, it's a big problem. And I don't know how fixable that problem is, but, you know, I just don't know how you stop it. How do we stop, how do we stop the violence? And I still keep going back to stuff that we've talked about in the past, where we got to start providing jobs, we got to provide hope and leadership even on our part to try to, see what we can do, because with no hope, we're not gonna, it's gonna take more than the police department. It's gonna take a lot to get everything going in the right direction. And I don't know the whole answer. I know we've worked on it here. I know that we've looked at minority participation, like even on the NGA, where we beefed that up. And the more we're doing here to provide decent jobs, and I know Antonio worked on that on the center, but the more we can provide decent jobs and the more hope we can provide, because unless we put a police officer on every corner of every part of every, the crime just shifts. I don't know what time that shooting happened last night, but my assumption is after the police were gone, or, burglars and people that burglarize our neighborhood are always looking for opportunities to do that. I just don't know unless we provide some sort of hope or whatever. I believe it's just a whole multitude of things that would have to go on to fix a problem, and it's a problem that absolutely needs fixing.
Anyone else?
Is this a back and forth?
Oh, please,
No,
this is a
no,
general
no,
conversation,
no, go
yeah.
ahead. No, it can be. I'm
It's a
sorry.
conversation, yeah.
I'm sorry, Chris, yeah.
And so we are on the same page just in terms of, I'm not saying that the police are the overall blame for crime, but just in terms of things happening in our wards, this is like the movie Groundhog Day. We've been talking about this same stuff since I've been down at City Hall, and we run into the same problems. We have the same questions and the same complaints that we've been having. Resources not being dispersed fairly. It's just certain things that aren't working, and we have to accept that. The chief has to accept that. It's just in terms of, and I'm gonna use this as a example, the redistricting. In my district, the 6, we end up taking 2 more neighborhoods that weren't the best neighborhoods. No disrespect to Alderman French because they were in his ward, and we
Very
but
good
we-
neighborhoods
yeah,
that
very-
suffer from
yeah.
high crime.
But we kept the same amount of officers. We kept the same amount of officers, and they expanded the area extremely larger. And so now we have the 6, which is the biggest district, with minimal officers, because we didn't have
And-
the adequate amount of officers
And, you know, and
previous.
one thing, it's
to that.
important to make the distinction too. There is the number of authorized officers, and then there's the actual level. And so you're right, when Chief Johnson made the decision to make the 6th district much larger, they kept roughly the same number of authorized officers, but all those positions are not filled. And so the actual officers, at last count, from my sources, are 23 officers down in the 6th district. And so, just so people know a little bit of the history here, in this very room, probably 3 years ago, when the chief first came in, he just accepted the job as police chief, and he rolled out his new plans for the department. The key to his plan involved changing how the police department policed, that was going to operate with less officers. And when he said he was shrinking the number of officers, many of us on the committee said, "Are you sure you want to do that?" And he said, yes. They're shifting to a new strategy of hotspot policing, so they can service the same number of neighborhoods with less officers. That has not worked out. Then they redistricted, eliminated 3 districts, made us a 6-district city instead of a 9-district city. And the 6th district, as you mentioned, became really overwhelmed with too much. And so it is important that we make a distinction between the criticism of the chief and the leadership and criticisms of the officers on the streets. Officers on the streets are just as frustrated, I think. We hear it, they can't say it publicly, but we hear it as aldermen. They are very frustrated. If you ask officers privately who work in the 6th district, they don't think it's fair to them at all that they have to cover such a violent area with so few officers. Sometimes there are empty cars sitting there on that lot because they don't have enough officers to put in the cars to patrol. And so this becomes a management issue. I'll also remind folks, too, is that I made a commitment to the chief to not criticize him at all in his first full year. His first full year, I felt like it was important to let him get in there, get his feet under him, put his plan in, give it time to see if it worked. 3 years later, I found that it has not worked, and furthermore, to get to your point, he's not been a good partner. And so the police can't do it themselves, but it's important to have somebody at the top who is always building those partnerships so that we're all working together. I feel like this chief's attitude is, I got it, the police department is none of your business, and then when his bad decisions end up with bad results for the city, everybody is at fault but him. It's the judge's fault. It's the prosecutor's fault. It's, 3 months ago or 6 months ago, it was the alderman's fault for not funding his request for new officers, even though he has 100 unfilled positions right there, right now. So I'm going to let other people talk. Alderman Green.
So what, while, the 6th district has been seeing, a huge increase in crime and in your murder rate, we've actually, in the 15th ward, have been going down in terms of our crime. But the one thing that we've been seeing a ton of is crimes related to drug usage. So, our vacant properties now, it's a constant battle to deal with folks who are using drugs, who are breaking into those properties, living in those properties. A lot of the robberies that we do see are drug related. And the one thing that my frustration is, that we are never talking about, the fact that we have an inordinate amount of cheap heroin that's on our streets right now that I think is leading to a lot of this violence. And, it's great that last week we passed the prescription drug monitoring database, but what we also know from that is every time that one of those goes into effect, that then it becomes harder for people to get legalized heroin, which is basically pills, and then what do? They end up going to the streets to try to find it. And we have yet to really see a good plan for how we deal with the amount of heroin that's on our streets that is leading to a lot of this crime, and we have yet to see a plan of how we can fund more access to treatments. We are severely limited in the amount of treatment that we're able to offer in the city, and what we're also seeing is just a lot of folks who are going into jail, not getting the treatment that they need, going right back out and doing the same thing over and over and over again. At some point in time, we've got to address the demand for heroin and not just look at everything from a supply side, and actually start to chip away at some of the usage. And we're seeing this across the country, but it seems like St. Louis, we're having a lot harder time acknowledging this problem, and a lot harder time getting people to the table to figure out how we actually address it and how we actually create some treatment opportunities, and really start to look at this heroin issue, because I do think a lot of the gun violence goes back to heroin as well. And when it's this cheap, there's a lot more battles over who's controlling what, and we've got to get to a point where we are really seriously looking at drug use in this city, and what we can do beyond just lock people up. And unfortunately, every conversation I've had with the mayor's office or with the chief about it, there's acknowledgement that there's a problem, but not really ever a plan on how we address it. Or it's just, well, we don't have enough funding because of Jefferson City or whatever. Well, at some point in time, we've got to figure out how to fund it here. Because otherwise, we're just going to keep chasing our tail with this issue until we can really get a handle on, I think, some of these root causes. Asset forfeiture.
It's appropriate for you to discuss that right now, because this is a week where we are in the Ways and Means Committee examining how we spend money, and especially regarding to policing and the police department and public safety. Alderwoman Flowers?
Yes, thank you. For instance, in January, the 6th District experienced 7 murders, I believe, with the first couple of weeks. Under that time, under the leadership of Captain Cousins, I was aware of a lot of the support that we were getting, which really wasn't much. The 6th District got from Special Ops, I think, a few days of support after that. In the 4th District, they had a number of burglaries, and they all went down to the 4th District because of the burglaries. What is more serious, people losing their lives or burglaries? We have not begun to support the different units there. I have seen a study that was, or a report by the Ethical Society, who hopefully will release something next month, that just shows the huge disparities right now in the police department. I have met with the chief, I've met with the mayor, and expressed my concerns, and it just seems to just go on just crickets. We don't get a lot from it. My community had a meeting in April, and we invited the mayor to that meeting to hear their concerns, and he chose not to come to that meeting. The chief did, but we just got the same song and dance, just let me handle it, I'll take care of it. Right now, my constituents are not happy with what he did in leaving that meeting, because really virtually nothing happened. My entire ward is in the 6th District. I go all the way to Riverview in 270. When redistricting happened, I asked some of the captains, like you said, the officers, how they felt about it. Did they think it was going to help them? They didn't have really a lot of positive things to say about it. They actually were concerned at how they were going to be able to cover the entire area with those many officers that was given per district. The morale is low among the police department, and I really think at this time that if the chief is going to run for mayor, I'm tired of him campaigning in chief's clothing. Go ahead and resign, run for mayor, but right now campaigning on the backs of the police men and women of this department who he's implemented many and many things that have not seemed to work. And, you know, my constituency wants to see results. There are officers going to attend to special needs in other areas, which last night proven not to be really effective. And what happens in our neighborhoods when something happens and we call, we can't get that help because they're in other locations. So I'm really concerned about the disparities. I'm really concerned about our chief and what he's doing right now in a political mode. And if that's his ambition, I think he should go ahead and resign and hopefully our mayor will be able to put someone in that position that can answer these needs and our concerns. And let's go ahead and try to get our community back in a better, safe environment. The people in my community, they want to feel safe too. We have a lot of shootings. I just had a shooting on my street a week and a half ago. A man was shot at 30 times in his vehicle. I haven't seen any extra patrol. I'm just not seeing the same attention citywide that's being given to other locations. And I understand these are locations that we have tourists and people that come and visit our city. It's important. But the people that live in these neighborhoods, that pay taxes, they want to see their officers, they want protection, it's just not getting that protection. And I'm really also concerned about the treatment of officers that seems to be race-based on our department, which is causing morale and a lot of issues. So it is something very serious. And I think our mayor needs to listen to us and to our people and do something about it.
Alderman Moore, did you want to make a comment?
Good morning. I have a street in my ward called Newstead Avenue. And Newstead runs from West Florissant all the way to Olive. In my ward, Newstead runs from Natural Bridge, joins with the 21st Ward, and runs all the way to Page. It is the most hideous and ridiculous third world type of living that you've ever seen in your life. Before Antonio French got to the Board of Aldermen, I was already asking for cameras. He came in and got his cameras. He did his own thing to get his cameras. I've been asking for cameras since 2007. Think about the family that just got killed, the man, the woman, and the child shot and burned. Before that, the young lady that was found in the trunk of the car. All this is happening down Newstead. You found a young man on Ashland in Newstead. Found a guy wrapped up in a rug behind the liquor store on Labadie in Newstead. Found the two young ladies shot after the fight down on Labadie and Vandervetter. Found the people in the apartment that was killed and left the baby alive on Natural Bridge. This redistricting and this hot spotting is a joke. They leave the cars in hot spot, and we haven't been on the news, but they set those cars on fire. They're unattended, no cameras in them. Set the police cars on fire. How much more disrespect are we going to have for our law enforcement? That when the chief get on the television and the mayor and say that he wants people to feel protected downtown, well, what about the people on the north side? We want to feel the same thing. One patrol car for 13,000 people, and they're taking our cars out of service and sending them downtown. They marching up and down the street looking like what we call that type of, it's too many of them. They look like soldiers and the Gestapo marching up and down Washington Avenue. 6 to 9 police officers in one block. Criminals know that the police are not coming. I sat on my porch night before last, and the first time in 2 years I've seen a car come down my street. They don't patrol. We don't get it. And the criminals know that they're not patrolling. They know they have a better opportunity of committing crimes because there's no patrol and no police visibility. You can find them at the gas station because they don't know how to police. They've been so disrespected, and the way what they're doing, they got to try to get home at night. They're worried about getting home themselves. And I say, if you're scared, join church. But we need police out there, and we need more visibility because this has gotten completely out of order. No police, more crime. Thank you, Antonio.
I agree with you. I agree with your frustration. I feel like, I was telling my wife, I feel like sometimes I'm in the third season of The Wire here, and I'm living in Amsterdam, where it's okay that 50 homicides happen in our area, but if one happens somewhere else, it gets the full attention of the administration and the chief. Meanwhile, as you mentioned, an infant was burned to death. And nobody even talks about it. There's no press conference. There's no pledge from the chief to track down her murderer. And it's just not fair. And when the chief comes on television or comes to our neighborhood meetings to tell folks that crime is down in the city, it is insulting because what you are doing is equating car break-ins to children and young black people being killed. And so what we are concentrating on and looking at is the incredible increase in homicides in our city that is even at a higher rate this year than last year, which was at a higher rate than the previous year, and so on, and the number of people being shot. The violence in our city is everybody's problem, regardless of what neighborhood you live in. It is not just downtown. If our city has another record homicide year, that negatively affects every person, business, anyone who is thinking about doing business in St. Louis. It does not matter what side of Del Mar it happened on. We have to get these murders down. Alderman Carter, you had another comment?
No, I just had a question. I guess for you, should we, is it possible if we can request the chief to come in on an annual basis?
Monthly basis?
Yeah. And report to us, I guess, some type of plan or what he sees happening just in terms of each district and what his pledge will be to make sure that resources are dispersed equally or even where they are needed or just something. I mean, we don't have anything, man. So just trying to figure out.
The chief is always invited to public safety committee meetings, and I wish that he would come more regularly, as many department heads do to the committees that deal with their departments. The chief has decided not to. But there will, as I mentioned before, Ways and Means will be looking at the police department budget. I imagine either the chief or a representative will be there, and that will be a good time to ask about allocation of resources.
Can I ask you this too? And what about us coming together too? And I don't know how everybody else feels, but the Department of Justice, I think that is needed. I mean, we have so many different things that are happening that, like I was saying earlier, I don't think that it's no one person or one thing that we could do to fix it. I think that we need to have an outside source come in and recommend to us exactly what it's going to need to boost the morale and change how things are going in the police department. Like I said, just the way how blacks and whites are treated alone, just in terms of being promoted and disciplined. I got a huge issue with that, and I'm pretty sure that some of my other colleagues do too. So one thing that I know that I'm pushing to see is the DOJ to come in and investigate our department. And I don't know what you think, our Chairman Kennedy, but I think we need to start that here, start the ask and start the case. So.
French, I have a question for you. I came last week to the last week thinking the chief was coming when we did the body camera thing last week. And was it correct that Mr. Filler said that under the peer plan, that's how we get drug enforcement when it's in the hotspot policing? There is no DEA, there's no drug enforcement agency. You were asking him questions, and he said that, yes, he acknowledged your question that, yes, there is no DEA, but that drug enforcement usually happens under the hotspot policing team. Is that what he said?
I don't remember that exact line of questioning. I am familiar that the chief has disbanded a lot of the units that dealt specifically with drug activity and gangs. And so going back to what he said a few years ago when he first initiated these changes, hotspot policing was going to be his answer to a lot of this stuff. But to answer your specific question, I don't remember that line of questioning.
Because when he did redistricting, he did pretty much eliminate the drug enforcement agents, which right now we're having a serious problem with
Yeah,
drugs.
across the city.
Yeah, and then, my community is to the point where they just feel like they're being conditioned to accept it, because when people call us, as you know, and say, I got drugs here at this address, and they're a little scared to call, they just think that we're supposed to get policemen at that time. We pass that off to our captains and to our district officers to try to help out as much as possible. But I think with the drug epidemic that's going on and the, basically the elimination of the Drug Enforcement Agency, and what I heard him say, Mr. Filler, was that in hotspot policing, if your neighborhood fits all 7 categories for them to come over in hotspot policing, then you would get drug enforcement, which is just unacceptable.
I agree. Any comments? Alderman?
There's just a couple of things that I'm wondering if maybe we want to, look at or investigate. This disparities issue, I think, it's not just in policing, it's in, service delivery and, all of that. I'm wondering about perhaps taking a point in time and pulling reports from Citizen Service Bureau and from the police department to look at how quickly a service request is fulfilled in, the 27th ward versus the 15th ward versus the 16th ward. So we can get a cross-city comparison on how that is happening. So we have some good, I guess, data behind, a lot of the assumptions that we're making. The second thing I would say, Alderman Carter kind of said it to me in passing as I was wrapping up last time, but I think looking at asset forfeiture reform as a place that perhaps we can fund some drug-related services. So what we've seen in some other cities is reforms, first and foremost, that if you end up not convicted of a crime and your assets have been seized, you actually get them back, which doesn't always happen. And you get them back in the form that you gave them to the officers, that the police took it in. But I think the second piece of that is, if something is seized as it relates to drug activity or drug sales, can we put that money then into treatment, into drug-related, activities? And I think that the second piece of that is as we look at, talking with corrections, we're seeing, a third at least of people at any given time who are in our jails who are there really because they're addicts. And so, maybe what we're needing to do is reevaluate that and look at maybe some kind of voucher or stipend where the money that would go with them to jail actually would follow them to treatment, or because we're just going to continue to see this same cycle. And with so much heroin on the market and it being so cheap, it's going to be really hard just to, I think, tackle it from an enforcement piece, that we've also got to figure out how to decrease the demand for it and tackle it from both sides. I mean, we've seen in Gloucester that, folks can now go to police stations and fire stations and turn in their drugs and get help. And it's actually working, and their crime has gone down, and there's, I think 80 or 90 police departments across the country that are doing that now. It's just a matter of finding, I think, the way that something like that could work here, or finding access to, the funding stream that could allow for folks to get into treatment, so that we're looking at this both from a drug supply standpoint and a drug demand standpoint. So we stop chasing our tail at some point in time.
Those are some good ideas, Alderwoman. Do you want to have the clerk make formal information requests for some information?
I think so. I think we can, if if maybe the three of us want to touch base after, and look at maybe some wards, both north and south, and put in a request for that information to see what data we can get.
So, one thing we find ourselves in is a little bit in a state of a limbo. Since since the city of St. Louis regained local control of our police department, there are many things that have not been fleshed out as far as how they will actually work under this new system. One of the things you talked about is the asset forfeiture dollars. As it is right now, without any new regulation or legislation from this board, those asset forfeiture dollars are basically spent at the discretion of the chief, perhaps with the approval of the mayor, but who knows how closely he's watching. And so basically, it becomes almost a slush fund for the chief to spend how he wants to. I think that would be an excellent source of funds to perhaps fund body cameras as we look to how to do that, or some other policy or equipment needs of the department. The other thing that is really in limbo, and this I will make a request of our clerk to look into, is the selection process for a new chief of police. Can you do a formal request to get this information from the city councilor on how they believe the city of St. Louis goes about selecting a new chief? Are we limited to just officers currently in the department? Can we do a national search? What is that process? It is not spelled out in the charter. Is it included in the new statewide statute that was passed to give us local control? Can you touch bases with the executive branch, with the city councilor, to look into this matter? As we now talk about possibly pushing to get new leadership in the police department, we should know what that means. Any other comments or questions before we adjourn?
Yes, Mr.
Oh,
Chairman.
yes, please. Go ahead.
As Alderwoman Green stated, the three of you getting together to get some statistics. Can I also give you some statistics that the caucus was also asking for, so that it's come from the Public Safety Committee, and we'll see what kind of response we get.
Please. Anything else? All right, well, it was a good discussion. I think it's one that's being had across the city, and it's one that is important to have down here in City Hall, too, as we are going through this crisis. Thank you. I think with that, the meeting is adjourned.